Okay. Good afternoon. We are organizing the web series on GST, customs and foreign trade policy. Today is the first day and we will be discussing on doing business with Asia with various other Asian countries. Mr. T.B. Chatterjee, our chairperson, Indirect Taxes Committee, is the speaker, and the session will be moderated by Vivek Jalan, who is the co-chairperson of the Indirect Taxes Committee. I request all the participants before starting just to mute the audio so that there is no disturbance in between, and when we will carry on the question answer session, you can unmute it. And you can also keep your video off also, except for the speakers.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
We request all the participants to please keep off the video and mute the audio also. And when there will be the question answer session, you can unmute the audio. Okay, I request Mr. Jalan to take the session forward.
Yeah, thank you, Sharwani. Welcome to all participants to our 3-day series on how to do business in Asia. It includes, we will do a comparative between India, China, Malaysia, Vietnam, and other Asian countries. Also, we will discuss upon the recent developments in GST, customs, foreign trade policy, DGFT related matters, and some critical issues also over the period of these 3 days. And in today's session, Mr. Chatterjee would be speaking on the various nuances of doing business in India and how the world economy looks like amidst these challenging times, and how India is situated as compared to other countries in Asia, economically, socially, and politically. So over to sir, and I would be moderating the session. And in case you have any queries during the session, you can type in the chat box. So after around 1.5 hours of such session, then I will ask sir all the questions which have been put up by the participants in the chat box during the session. At the end, of course, after I ask all the questions, we can have an open house also where participants can also ask their queries if any. Thank you so much. Thank you all for attending. Over to Mr. Chatterjee for taking the session forward.
Thank you, Vivek. Thank you, Sharwani. Good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to this web series meeting. Today, I thought I'll discuss the whole issue into 3-4 models. First, I will try to give you an overview of the COVID-19 status, just for your informations. Total affected people as on date is around 25,000, considering the whole country as a whole. And we have around 8,000 people already cured, and around 600 people have died. So this is a status, and if you see the average number of in and out, average number of in is around 1,400 to 1,500, and average number of people being cured every day, approximately 500 per day. So this is a status, and in this background, we would like to discuss the compatibility of India vis-a-vis other Asian countries so far manufacturing base is concerned. Just to start with, I will just give you 2 very large names. They have just closed the factory in China about 7-8 days back. You must be knowing both the companies. One is Japanese watchmaker, Citizen. They have closed their Guangzhou factory. Number is Microsoft's Nokia mobile manufacturing unit. They have also closed their manufacturing operations in Guangzhou. Then Panasonic and other 100 companies have already closed their manufacturing activities. And certainly there is a negative sentiment to base the entire manufacturing operations in one particular single country. So there is some opportunity for the Asian nations, particularly India, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. Japan is also another country. You must be knowing that Japanese government has already announced $20 billion as an incentive to bring its manufacturing operations in Japan. So these are the issues. Now, before I talk about India, I just want to tell you where India stands on certain important areas. India is the most favorite nation so far back office operations are concerned. You will be surprised to know in offshoring operations, India stands number one and servicing world to the extent of 55% of the outsourcing requirement. India is the second largest producer of casting iron today. India is the second largest steel and cement producers. India is occupying third largest real estate operations. India is the second largest mobile manufacturer in the world. India is the third largest coal producer in the world. India is the fourth largest iron ore manufacturers in the world. India is occupying the 75% of the export market in terms of polishing diamond and occupies the number one position in the world. It is the second largest manufacturer of two-wheelers and trackers. It is the third largest heavy truck manufacturer in the world. And India is the fourth largest car manufacturer in the world. These are the latest statistics, and these would give a position of India vis-a-vis other countries. Now, for setting up industry, a new industry, because since I was attached with a very large multinational company who have set up their several manufacturing units all over the world. So I will be able to tell you what are the basic factors that are considered for the purpose of locating an industry in a particular country. The most important, there are 7-8 factors which are very, very important. Number one is market. Market means consumptions. The unit which is being set up, whether it can service a major part of the requirements of the people of the country. So far India is concerned, you must be knowing that it is the third largest consumer in the world. Whenever you will try to understand consumer, that is consumption effect, you have to see a country's GDP in terms of purchase power parity and not real GDP. In terms of purchase power parity, India's total GDP is approximately $11 trillion. $1 trillion means 76 lakh crores in rupee. So its total consumption base is around $11 trillion. That means 76 into 11 will be the total amount of consumptions in the whole country in terms of rupee. In terms of position, world position, India is after China and USA. You all know that in terms of nominal GDP, India ranks 5th positions. But in terms of PPP, India ranks 3rd positions. That is, first is China, second is US, and third is India. Another factor is very important, that demography of the whole country. India is a young country. Why I call it as young? Because 65% of its population, you know, 135 crore, 65% of the population is below 35 years age. And you will be surprised to know that 50% of the population is below 25 years age. And the average age of the Indian people is 28 years. And that is why it is called Young India. Young India has the advantage of huge consumption. So it is a great market for the world. Today, market is a very, very significant factor. You must be knowing that a Chinese company have set up their industries in India. Mobile manufacturing company. Why they have set up? They have also their own consumption based, but India, you'll be surprised to know that the number of mobile, registered mobile is 140 crore against our total population of 135 crore. Almost everybody has got one mobile. This being the consumption pattern, India will certainly rank as #1 contender. To be very frank, India has to fight to secure its first positions under the changed circumstances by fighting two countries, according to me, not against Singapore, not against Japan, although they have all the many advantageous conditions. They have to fight only with two countries. One is Vietnam. They are a very, very strong contender. Another is Thailand. And of course, third is your another Chinese country, Taiwan. Now, Taiwan is already a developed country, and developed country has a certain advantages and disadvantages too. So far market is concerned, it is $11 trillion market. Whenever I say market, market means goods and services. And 135 crore people with a strong consumer base. People have no other alternative in the world other than to come to India because of market. Next factor, what I consider is the most important, is the raw material, which is very, very important. Because your market is there, but if you do not have the raw material, if you have to import all the raw materials from outside the country, then logistically you are not convenient positions. So you need to have some basic raw materials. And on basic raw materials, you are aware of the fact that India has the highest amount of coal accumulations in the whole country. India is the third largest iron ore producers. India has a large reserves on bauxite, copper, and gypsum and limestone. India's rich reserve of limestone has helped to achieve a great positions in manufacturing cement, because in cement, lime is one of the most important raw material. So if you talk about the basic raw materials like coal, iron, copper, bauxite, the limestone, mica, we have got sufficient reserves to encash it. That is why Vedant is there, Nalco is there, Hindalco is there. So many big companies are there. Hindustan Copper is there, Birla Copper is there. Several companies are there in this particular field. Now, you'll be surprised to know that India exports 19.98% of the total raw material to the world. That means in terms of raw material exports, India's position is 19.98% as compared to China 16.54, Japan 14.35, Singapore 3.79, Thailand 8.34, and Vietnam 11.01% of the total import of raw material. If 100 rupee import are made towards raw material, 19.98% goes from India. Of course, it is not a very good signal. Why it is not a good signal? If you export your raw material, then you are basically not adding much values. So therefore, exporting raw material is not a very good sign. Exporting value-added products is a good sign. So India exports 19.98% on account of raw material. These raw materials can be converted into finished goods, and these finished goods can be exported. That will add more values, create more employment, have more foreign exchange reserves. So in this area, it shows that India has sufficient amount of raw material. But instead of using it locally, we are exporting, and those raw materials are being imported by Japan, China. They are manufacturing finished goods and selling at a value-added price. I think this area we have to see how best we can preserve our own raw materials and use it for bigger manufacturing facilities. You must be knowing POSCO, that Korean company. They wanted to set up world's largest steel plant in Odisha. But due to some political issues and certain other factors, this could not be materialized. But world biggest manufacturing operations companies, they are India as a great source of not only raw material, but also labor. So I'll come to the next area, which depends, which is a very, very important factor for setting up an industry. Before coming to that, I'll just give you some labor related informations. In our country, it is a matter of concern that 94% workmen, I repeat, 94% of the workmen falls under unorganized segment. And only 6% comes from organized segment. Of course, this includes agricultural laborers also. But there is a huge amount of skilled and unskilled laborers available in the country. If I give you some statistics, you will find that the country has 4,599 vocational institutes, degree courses, diplomas in the country. 4,599 institutes, recognized institutes. Apart from several IITs, IIFT, IISc, IMA, etc. There are 789 universities in the country. And it is one of the most educated countries in the world. Now, as I have already explained, 65% of the total population age is below 35 years. This workforce can be utilized by way of giving extensive training in vocational institutes and by organizing several skill development training courses, and that way India could certainly look forward for a better improvement in the labor segment. Now, there are 46 labor laws in our country, and these labor laws are age-old labor laws. Now, the current government has basically subsumed all labor laws and made 4 basic labor laws in the country. That means 4 labor laws replaced 46 old labor laws, and the name of these codes are labor law on wages, labor law on industrial relations, labor law on social security, and labor law on safety, health, and working conditions. So these are the 4 labor laws replace the earlier 46 labor laws. This has not been implemented totally. It is in the implementation stage, but we expect, say within a period of 1 year or so, the new labor law will come into force, which will be more flexible, transparent, quick to implement, and it will also safeguard the interest of large section of the people, which will include both organized segments as well as unorganized segments. But this area, India needs to do further so that quick exit policy is also framed. This is what we have also seen, that many MNCs, they are ready to set up the unit provided there is a easy exit policy is also there in the respective labor laws of the country. So these 4 labor laws will be favorable both to the employer as well as employee, and it will replace the age-old 46 labor laws, and it will be a great help both to the employer and employee once it is implemented on a seamless basis. So third most important factor is taxation. You all know that we work on taxations. So taxation is very, very important. Why taxation is important? You have a market, you have labor, you have raw materials, so you have manufactured the goods. The question is that if you have a high tax zone, then the countries may make money in the form of the revenue, but the companies who are taking the risk to set up the company, their retained earnings come down drastically. So they are interested, like you must be knowing that, you must have heard the word tax shopping. They would like to go into those segments or those countries where they can get a good amount of consumer, while they can set up their own manufacturing facility with the availability of the materials, labor, administrations, management. At the same time, they can retain profit. Now today, if you compare the rate of taxation as applicable in India versus other 5 countries, you will find where we stand. You all know at present, the new industries which are being set up, for them, the direct taxation rate is only 15%, that is 15%. Those who are new companies after 2019. And old companies who are continuing today, they have also another rate of 22% or 25%. 22% where there is no exemptions facilities, and 25% with exemption facilities. So for those which are old companies, before 2019, they have to pay tax at the rate of 22% without any exemption benefit, straight. And in case of new company who are going to set up new company or who have set up a new company after probably October 2019, the rate of tax is 15%. Now, if you see, let's see what is the taxation rate in other countries. I am talking about direct taxations. Japan is another contender, 30.62% as on date, the direct tax rate. China, I am not comparing But still, for your information, the direct tax rate applicable in China is 25%. It is Singapore whose rate is 17%. Thailand, 20%. Vietnam, 25%. Thanks to Anindita for giving me all these informations, because she is basically handling the international taxation of our firm. Now, you cannot compare India with Singapore. It's a very small country. It is not even 50% of Calcutta, with only 50 lakh people. So they cannot think to have world-class manufacturing facility. But if you leave Singapore and compare with other countries who are your contenders, you will find India secures the first position in terms of taxations. And after implementation of the GST, the indirect taxation segment is also very much smooth. You all know that 17 taxes which were there previously prior to 1st July 2017 is now in the history book. It is only GST which takes care both goods and services, and it has replaced 17 tax law seamlessly. One company can comply its total tax requirements sitting from one place. It may have 29 places of manufacturing centers or selling centers, but no problem. You can handle your entire taxation matter sitting from any one place. It is only one law. It is totally standardized. Those are the days gone when we had 29 states, 29 tax laws, and 29 different tax laws, 29 different taxation rates. No excise, no sales tax, no VAT, no purchase tax, no entry tax, no octroi, no entertainment tax, no luxury tax. You have only one tax, GST. And after implementation of the GST, although there were some issues at the initial stage, still there are some issues which all of us from the chamber are taking care of. But today you have all to agree that it has not only eased the indirect tax segments, but do you know what is the effective tax rate of GST in our country? It is just 15%. Although you have 5% rate, 12% rate, 18% rate, 28%, several other taxation rates are there. But if you see the effective tax rate, the rate is 15%. You know what was the tax rate before GST? Taking into account excise, VAT, entry tax, and other related taxations, it was around 34%. Against 34% tax, now the indirect tax rate, effective tax rate is 15%. Now, if you compare the indirect tax rate with other countries, let us see. You see, China's indirect tax rate is very low. They just want to boost the consumptions. You know, indirect taxes are directly connected with the consumptions. Higher the tax, lower the consumptions. In China, the effective tax rate of indirect tax rate is 4.33%. Japan, 10%. It's a VAT. In Japan, it is called as consumption tax. Singapore, it is known as VAT. The effective tax rate is 7%. Thailand, it is known as IDT, and it is also known as VAT, 7%. And Vietnam, It is also known as VAT. The rate is 10%. So if you compare with these countries, our indirect tax rate is little higher, but still it is much within the much within the controllable limit. And if you compare it with pre-GST and post-GST, it is just 50%. So that way, both from taxation point of view, that is both from direct taxation and indirect taxation from India certainly plays a great role. And with the implementation of the direct tax code, which is expected within another 1 year or so, we hope there will be an ease in compliance in the areas of direct taxations. So this is the fourth segment, fourth factor, which is a very favorable to India. Now, the fifth area, which is equally very important, is the infrastructure and transport facilities. Here also there is the statistics. And you have to depend on the statistics. These statistics are all taken from World Bank. In India, 63.24% of the total roads are paved roads, which means the transportation can take place smoothly. It's called paved roads. As compared to India, China's position is 53%. That means 53% of their roads are motorable. In Japan, 80%. It's a very small country. Those who have visited Japan, they know they don't have any place also to set up their airports. If you see the Kansai airport is the world's most, I'll say, wonder that the airport has been set up on the sea. They don't have space. So in case of Japan, 80% of their roads are motorable. Singapore is a small country. It's a country which you can reach from one place to another within 2 hours, one end to another end. It is 100%. Thailand, 98%. Vietnam, it is only 19%. I am referring Vietnam time and again because in my whole review, I find Vietnam is the major contender side by side India. So if you compare India and Vietnam, there is a hell and heaven difference. In Vietnam, only 19% of their roads are motorable. For a well-organized industry, you need well infrastructure, sound infrastructure with motorable roads. And there, you will all agree that in the road segment, India has developed a lot. Also note that Ministry of Highway, that is Honorable Minister Gadkari sir, his target is to spend 1,20,000 crore further for setting up new roads in the country. Now let's see what about the port position. Roads are okay, but at the same time you need ports, you need small ports, you need big ports. Now, India has 13 major ports like Nabaseba, Haldia, Paradip, like that. It's called big ports. And 200 small ports. That is seaports. In case of Japan, and side by side, India has got 486 airports, airstrips, and military centers from where flight can take place. 486. So India has got 486 airports, airstrips, military bases, flying schools, and 13 big seaports and 200 small seaports. Over and above, 63% of the roads available as motorable. If you compare with these, with Japan and other countries, Japan has got 98 airports and 5 seaports. Singapore has 10 airports and 2 seaports. Thailand has 6 airports and 12 seaports. Vietnam has 10 seaports, airports, and 44 seaports small. So, if you consider the infrastructure part in terms of roads, in terms of airports, in terms of seaports, in terms of big seaports, in terms of small seaports, India is certainly in a very positive position in the whole world. Particularly, I am talking about Asia, among Asian countries. So, infrastructure-wise, of course, it has to further improve because India is a very large country. Really, it cannot be compared with countries like Singapore, Thailand, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and other countries. But still, India is certainly in a much better position. Next, most important factor is sixth position, sixth factor. Sixth factor? Ease of doing business. There are 11 areas which are considered for the purpose of understanding where we stand in terms of ease of doing business. Now, while we compute the ease of doing business, there are 11 factors are considered. One, construction permit, how much time it takes. Then getting electricity consumption, electricity line. Then regulatory approvals. Then credit facility, market, taxation system, paying of tax system, trading facilities, and other and starting business. Now, recently, in the last year, this year expectations is further better. India as a whole, taking into all these 11 areas, India's position is 63. Vis-a-vis, China's position is 31. Japan is 29. Vietnam is 70. Our status is 63. Singapore is number 2. But again, I will say that you just cannot compare Singapore, Thailand with India. So if you have to compare between Vietnam and India, India's position is 63rd and Vietnam's position is 78th as per World Bank 2020 report. Now, I personally feel in the 21, this position will further be improved because of 2-3 factors. One factor is IBC, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, enactment and operations. Last year it was not considered. This year it is expected to be considered. Then implementation of the GST, implementation of the new labor laws, which we have discussed some time back. If we consider all these major areas where India has made a marked positions, I think this position will improve to a great extent. In this regard, we'd like to inform you that in our firm, we have been able to set up a foreign company within a period of 14 days, getting all necessary approvals. Again, I repeat, we have been able to set up a foreign company in India within a period of 14 days after obtaining all necessary approvals, including GST, including foreign exchange, IEC code, everything, and opening of bank account also. This is the latest position. And we have incorporated the company within a period of only 2 days after getting the name approval. So this is a scenario today. So those who are not dealing with the matters regularly, they may not be able to know to what extent we have progressed. So in terms of ease of doing business, which is a very, very important factor to determine, you have all favorable conditions. But in ease of doing business, India has to improve in 4 areas. Why we are 63rd? And why Singapore is number 2? What are the major bottlenecks? There are 4 major areas we are still not very comfortable. Which are the major areas? Number 1 is registration of property. You might feel that what registration is very easy. You prepare the deed, conveyance agreement, go to the registry office, pay the stamp duty, get the registrations. No. Before getting registrations, you have to know the status of the property. You have to search, and this search is not conclusive. You really do not know the search report which you have got is correct or wrong, because the advocate might have gone to 1 or 2 registry office. And in the registry office, documents are available only up to certain period. Before that, no documents are available. So when you go for buying a property, if you have to know last 50 years status of that property, it is very, very difficult to get. And foreign companies, they want to be 200% sure about the title of the property. Nowadays, thanks to information system, you must be knowing that all registered deeds are put in the computer systems. But think about 1940, 1947 documents, 1950 documents, 1960 documents, you may not get it. So here, India has to improve a lot. Second most critical factor, I can understand its importance, That is the problem in enforcing your contracts. Your valid dues. If you have to go and get a degree, it will take 15, 20, 30 years. It is very difficult to enforce your rights in India. The legal systems is so complicated and it is so consuming that it is very, very difficult for a foreign company to depend on the legal systems. And for which you will find most of the foreign companies, they have an arbitration clause. And those arbitrations are not held in India. They make sure that the place of arbitration is kept either in London or Singapore. So our legal system should be much more transparent. Until and unless we know that we are able to enforce our rights, then it is very difficult to get the confidence of the foreign investors. So here, I feel that India has to improve a lot in the areas of enforcing the contracts, particularly enforcing the contract on account of bills receivable. That is a very important. Even for check dishonor, we find lot of time is taken to get an order from the court, which is very evident that once check is dishonored, it's very evident that the check is dishonored because the bank's note is there. In spite of that, it takes years after year to decide on a very simple check dishonor case, 138 case, popularly known as. So in these areas, India has to improve. They have to organize for video conferencing, for petitions, for arguments. It's not necessary that you have to go to the court and make the presentations. So a great change is necessary in the whole legal system. If you ask me a very serious question about where is the major areas which needs immediate repairing, I will say legal system. People have to have more and more confidence in legal system. If this confidence is lost, then confidence in the country is also lost. I think this area, India has to improve a lot. I know one case I handled in Dubai, and my practical thing is that my practical experience is that in Dubai, every commercial settlement is decided within 7 days. And today, if you file a case, it will take 2 decades, 3 decades to decide. Then there will be appeal. Against that, there will be a further appeal in the High Court, single bench. Then again, it will go to the division bench. Then against that order, you can go to the Supreme Court. There is no end of it. I think this area, India needs a radical change. If it has to come #1 position in the world in the manufacturing and commercial way. So this is about the, now the 7th area is the political stability, transparency. This is a very, very important area. We all know that India is a democratic country with a federal administration structure. There are 28 states, 8 union territories. So there are 36 states and number of districts are 736. Each districts are manned by a district collector. Each state is run by a separate democratically elected governments. And today we have a very strong government. And so far, transparency, expression of rights, expression of opinion, giving your views. We are completely, it is the largest democracy in the world. So I don't think in the political situation, we need to elaborate further, because we have a political system, we have our own constitutions, we have our stability, and we have the political rights, and there is a democratic system with full transparency. Here Google can work, Facebook can work, anybody can work with dignity. These are the 7 factors which are more important. Now, if I consider one by one, again for your information, first you need a good market, then you need to have a raw material source, then you need to have a good labor. Here we need to improve. It needs a lot of improvement only for skill development. Mind that 65% of our total population age is below 35 years. It is, I am telling it's an asset, but it could be a liability also if you cannot train those 65% people. So it should be the obligations and duty of the state to make sure that these 65% people are trained properly in the vocational area, in the technical area, in the managerial area, in the legal areas, various areas. Fifth, transportations. 6, taxations. 7, ease of doing business. By and large, in all these 7 areas, India certainly occupies a favorable positions. The last part, all are okay. Next question is that, is your country is open? I am now ready to set up. Are you ready to accept me? You know, in the year 1991, 24th July, India opened its entire market to the world. Today, almost every segments, FDI is permitted up to a limit of 100%. I'll just tell you the sectoral cap. There are 2 ways foreigner can come to India. One through automatic approval route, another is approval route. Automatic route and approval route. Now, where law says that is the automatic route, which means you do not need any approval. You have to just comply certain formalities. The approval for the purpose of taking an industrial license, which was there prior 1991, it is no more there today, excepting in 4 or 5 industries, atomic energy and other areas, weapon and others. Most of the areas are open to the foreigners. I'll just tell you, in infrastructure, where we need huge amount of investments, 100% FDI is allowed under automatic route. Automotive, 100%. You must be knowing Hyundai, Honda City, Toyota, they are all 100% owned by foreign companies. No approval, because automobile is under 100% automatic route. Pharmaceutical, 74% automatic. But that doesn't mean you cannot come with 100%. If you want to come with 100% wholly, then you have to take the approval of the government. Up to 74%, no approval. If you go beyond 74%, you are most welcome, but go through the permission routes. In service, particularly in the banking, insurance, insurance broking, etc., there the route is available up to from 26 to 49%. In bank, 49%. Then in chemicals, it is 100% FDI allowed under automatic approval route. Textile, 91%. Airlines, now, previously it was 49, now it is 100%. Today, if anybody, any foreign airline company wants to purchase Jet Airways with 100% shareholding, it is allowed. Previously, it was not there. So, barring only few areas like banking, insurance, where there is some sectoral cap, by and large, all other areas, 100% FDI is allowed. 100% automatic approval route means no approval. You come, set up the industry, and in respect of your capital contributions, you need to comply certain formalities with the Reserve Bank of India once the fund comes and once the shares are allotted. These are only compliances, but no approval is necessary. So now if you compare all these 8 factors, you will find today India is certainly in a much better positions. So I think that we should be able to take up these issues, these presentations, these submissions in various forums. And this is a high time for us to represent the country before the foreign investors, clarifying where India stands today. India is the 3rd largest consumption economy in the whole world and 5th largest nominal GDP holder in the whole world. India is aspiring to reach $5 trillion economy in 24-25. That is nominal GDP. Although it looks like difficult because of the COVID-19 situations, but I have a strong belief that India will certainly be able to achieve it. May not be 24-25, it might be late for 1 or 2 years, but 5 trillion economy is not a far-fetched idea. It is possible, it is achievable. We have a strong people, we have a strong administrations, we are still managerial people, we do not have any dearth of technical people, we do not have any dearth of trained people, educated people. Our people are running the large organizations like Microsoft, Google, and whatnot. So I think there is a time when there will be a time when you will find a reverse flow to the country, because our country needs a lot of good people who are located outside India also. So it is a good opportunity for all of us to represent our country, this great country. It's a huge potential country, and you all know this country is not yesterday's country. It is 5,000 years back. This Indus civilizations, if you go into the detail in the history, it is a 5,000 years back civilizations. So with this, I'll go back to Vivek to ask me any other questions on this subject. And if you have any query or any question, we should be very happy to reply those queries. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your views. We are certainly enlightened by the statistics and the position which you have put India in, at least now, in these challenging times. But there are a few queries and some issues also. You see, you have, sir, you have dealt mainly about the consumption story of India. So yes, if somebody wants to cater to the Indian market, it is great. But now the world is also looking at India as a manufacturing hub for production for export purpose. But China, you know, export is highly incentivized. They do not even want to now abide by World Trade Organization norms, whereas India will not do that. So how do you see the competitive advantage of India as far as export is concerned?
You see, there are certain issues in the incentives area. Now, what China is doing, what they are doing with the, exchange is their one of the major weapon. They have kept the exchange really not in the proper figure. It is highly controlled. It is not a market oriented. In other words, I just wanted to say that they have huge amount of foreign exchange reserve, and you must be knowing they have $1.2 trillion fund kept with the Federal Reserve itself. So they can play with the reserves. We have also a very strong reserve around $476 billion as per last report. But the thing is that export, the objective of any export will be exports should be there in terms of exporting goods and not exporting taxes. Now, India has got certain advantages. One advantage is that, that in exports, you are entitled to import the entire capital goods without payment of duty. Entire capital goods, which means if your capital cost is 100 crores and if the custom duty, say for example 10%, the 10 crores, these entire 10 crores you will not be required to pay at all, provided you export 60 crores worth of goods in a period of 6 years. That too, you can also get another 2 years additional time if you approach to that. So in terms of capital goods, it is totally net of taxes. Now, in case of raw material, you are entitled to import all raw materials for your exports without payment of any duty. I am telling you the way which you have to find out. These are the normal ways. Vis-a-vis another way I will talk about. So in case of raw materials, you can source your entire raw materials without payment of a single duty, neither IGST nor BCD, basic custom duty. In addition to that, there are incentives in the form of merchandise exporting scheme, India scheme. In service also, they have extended further ACIS schemes. Now, if you do not want to go into the licensing, you can set up your total factory in SEZ, which I have set up, 500 crores worth of asset. We have not paid any custom duty. We have just paid the cost of the raw material. The entire raw materials are allowed under green channel. You need not to pay, not through any sort of restrictions, not in sort of any advanced license facilities. You manufacture and you export from the country, and you also get the incentives. Now, these are the benefits which can be given by the state, by the country. In addition to that, there is a duty drawback facility. So these facilities are available. what China is giving, that really we do not know what they are giving, what they are not giving, how they are incentivizing the whole cost of manufacture base. We do not know. But I find there are three areas where there are the advantages which India has to provide. Mind that in India, Indian products are not competitive only because of three factors. I again repeat, Indian goods are not competitive for three basic factors in export market. Number one, our cost of power is very high. When you compare with China or other countries, you have to consider three areas: cost of power, cost of logistics. Our logistic cost is 9 to 11% of the total sales value. Averagely, if you go into the detail of any annual report, you will find 9 to 11%. Against approved rate is 5%. And third highest cost is the financing cost. Financing cost in our country, even for exports, is not less than 10% against the interest rate of 4% in other countries. So we are basically not competitive because of these three areas: power consumptions, logistics, and finance cost. If we prune this area, if we take care of this area, if we make available the available fund for the exporters at 4 or 5% interest rate, if the exporters are able to set up their factory in SEZ, and thereby they can get a huge amount of logistics benefit. And in power cost also, in SEZ, if you set up your factory, the entire electric consumptions which you have, there is a component of electricity duty, if you see into that. But if you set up a factory in SEZ, that electricity duty is also exempted. So you have to really know how to take care of this cost part well, so that you are able to be competitive. So these three areas are most important areas where companies are to consider, and not country cannot consider. It is you who has to set. And you know, the income tax exemption for the SEZ, although the sunset clause is already there up to 31st March, but there has been a strong demand that these extensions should be extended for another 5 years in the background of these COVID-19 cases. From our chamber, we have taken up the matter with the government. So once this is approved, I think setting up an industry in SEZ area, you will be able to get all these benefits.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Another query is from Mr. Bijay Day. Is there any possibility for change in export incentive percentage rate for ferroalloys and steel industries after the lockdown?
Yeah, actually, you know that there is a MEIS scheme which is going to be replaced by RoDTEP, Remission of Duties on Export Quota Scheme. It was supposed to be implemented from 1st April, but due to this COVID-19 situation, the new EXIM policy of 2025 has been deferred to 31st December 2020. So once the new scheme comes, I think under RoDTEP you will find the revised percentage. But what will be the percentage that needs to be calculated, and your association or industry has to take up the matter with the Commerce Ministry to find out, with all the calculations, to establish what is the amount of taxes which are included in your cost. And in fact, many practicing firms like ours, we are also doing for tea industry, fruit and vegetable industries, to make presentations to the ministry explaining what is the amount of what is the amount of taxes already included and not able to be subsumed under the GST, like electricity duty, fuel tax, VAT on fuel, which is a part of your transportation cost, several other taxes still not subsumed. So those computations are to be made, and a suitable presentation should be made to the ministry so that your rate is not below the rate which is there today under MEIS schemes. So a lot of jobs are to be done in this area, but still there are time. But yes, it is a fact that the rate will be changed. Whatever rate is there in MEIS, that is not going to be duplicated in ROT-TET scheme.
Okay, sir, next issue is now we need an advice that what kind of companies or what kind of products should be manufactured in India, and specifically for West Bengal, what kind of products should be manufactured or what kind of industry should be set up in West Bengal and India also.
I have a very personal opinion about West Bengal. I have made a lot of research work, and I find West Bengal is not a natural destination of the manufacturing industry. I know you may not be very happy to know all these things, mainly because of 2-3 factors. Why it is not a natural destination? It is not a natural destination because, as I have already explained you, that industry should always be close to the raw material availability and the market. These are the 2 important ingredients necessary. Now, if you consider the raw material part, excepting coal, West Bengal does not manufacture any raw material. We have to bring it either from Odisha, Bihar, or some other states with additional logistic cost. And so far market is concerned, whenever any factory is located, they also want to see the local market, because taking material manufactured in one state and bringing it to other, it has a cost. So if you have a good amount of market, then certainly it is a very good for you to set up. But so far market is concerned, it is like that West takes care of 30% of the total India's market. North takes care of 35% of the India's total market. South takes care of 20% of the total India's market. And 15% takes care of by the eastern region, including West Bengal. So you find 15% of the market is located in West Bengal, and 85% of the markets are located outside West Bengal. For that, you have to manufacture goods in West Bengal and need to bring there with additional manufacturing. Instead of doing that, if you set up a factory in West or North, you'll be much closer to the client. Where West Bengal has got huge advantages, according to me, in the service industry. Service industry in terms of trading activity, today you see India in Calcutta or Eastern region is one of the major trading houses in the country. Siliguri, West Bengal, these are the places. Then there is a huge amount of tourism. It is a very unique place where you will find river, you will find sea, you will find mountains, you will find jungle, forest, everything. These are extremely good positions. So therefore, hospitality industry is a very good area. Tourism is a very good area. Education, it could be the education hub of all countries, of the entire country. In fact, 5 or 6 Nobel laureates, they are all mostly from Kolkata. So you can see that it has a huge potential in terms of, we have around 150 universities in West Bengal, technical institutes in West Bengal, several more than 20-25 universities. So in terms of manufacturing, there are areas like jute is a very big area, and you know West Bengal is securing a very, very good position in the areas of your casting iron. Still it is number 1 in India. Tea industry is certainly a good place for Eastern region is a very good place, and engineering will certainly be another area. Otherwise, I'll suggest or I'll strongly recommend to go aggressively for expanding in the education, in the medical, in the tourism, in the trading, as well as other correlated areas. So this is mainly because of, and of course, software is a service industry, in other words, and you will be surprised to know, if you invest 500 crores in a manufacturing industry, you can generate only 50 employment. Are you with me? If you invest 500 crores in a company, you generate only 50 employments. And if you invest 500 crores in a service industry, you generate 2,000 employment. This is the ratio. So investment and employment situation wise, this is a very, very good place so far locating service industry is concerned. In that case, you know, the India is one of the major offshore service providers in the world, where Calcutta, Bhubaneswar, they are occupying a very, very dominant role. So tourism, your software services, software development, and hospitality, educations. If we look into those areas, I think West Bengal will certainly be a very, very dominant position. Leather industry. Leather industry has grown up very rapidly in Eastern region. What is the basic reason? The basic reason is that it has been shifted from Kanpur to West Bengal, because in those states slaughtering has been prohibited. Many people feel, then why such a big leather industries have come, leather complex have come. Yes, in leather complex, I understand around 2 lakh people are working. But if you want to really know why leather industries has been located in Calcutta, shifting from south and Kanpur, basic reason is that slaughtering in those states have been prohibited. So you do not have the hides there, but in West Bengal, slaughtering is permitted. So that is why those companies who were there, very, very dominant leather companies in those areas, they have shifted their operations from south and north to east. So if you consider these areas into account, so leather, tea, jute, engineering, cast iron, software, education, tourism, hospitality, these are the area. Medical, a lot of medical hospitals have come, you know that. It can be a center, like the way we go to Mumbai for Tata Center, for cancer treatment. West Bengal could be one place for to host every patient for their treatment. So it can be transformed easily, and we should look into that so that more and more people are employed.
Okay. Sir, the most important factor of production and sometimes the most debated and with maximum issues, land. How and where to get land in West Bengal and in the country?
You see, land is a very, very delicate area, and it is also a fact. In Bengal, issue is little different as compared to the other states. Land is a subject of state. You must be knowing that. It is not appearing in the concurrent list. It is not appearing in the central list. So it is totally an area for states. So every state has its political directions, has its political aim, political objectives, etc., etc. But it is a fact that land can be considered as another factors of productions. So like the way we go and buy the land, land should be available and it should be sellable. And the entrepreneurs should be advised to procure their own land, like the way they are procuring the labor, they are procuring the capital. They should also go for, I know most of the industries will say, no, we need state sale. Of course, you need state sale where it is needed. Suppose you have purchased 5 different lands located little different positions. It is not contiguous. In such case, I think states' help is necessary to make sure that the entire land is contiguous. In those cases, states' help is necessary. Otherwise, like I can tell my own experience of my company. We have purchased 50 hectares land, just going there and making a term, and we got the land, the entire land for the SEZ. So therefore, land should be available. Wherever lands are available in the hands of the states, it should be offered. Wherever it is not available, the entrepreneur should take his own initiative to buy the land, like the other factors of productions, like your labor, like raw materials, like capital goods, the same way. And India is a very large country, and huge amount of lands are available. So far West Bengal is concerned, there is, or some other in Bihar or Odisha, you will find those lands mostly are cultivatable lands and highly cultivatable lands. So as a result, uh, state government may not come directly to rescue, but state government can certainly help where you need their assistance in those areas.
Okay.
And I would like to tell you, every country has its land related laws. It is not that wherever you go, you just select this land and I want it by tomorrow. It is not there. Even in Singapore, in Japan, in any other countries, land has a certain rules and regulations.
Okay. Sir, last question is relating to these oil prices, which have taken an unprecedented beating. So how do you see these oil prices vis-a-vis the world economy, and would these reduced prices be helpful to India's industry vis-a-vis the other countries in Asia?
Now, oil is a very delicate and very important area to discuss, because every country's economy depends on oil. Unfortunately or fortunately, India imports 84% of the total oil requirement. And only we have 16% oil generation, own generation in Rajasthan, in Digboy and other places. So naturally, if the oil prices is soft, it is easier for the country to take care of their fiscal issues. But one thing I just want to tell you, everybody, the price which you see, it is just for a very, very, very temporary period. It has got a direct link with the world consumptions. Today, oil price hovering in the range of, I am talking about Brent oil, because India buys Brent oil mostly. Its price is around 20 to 25. Against our budget was $65. In other words, 2021 budget was prepared based on a price range of $65 per barrel. Against we are buying at 2025 today. I think this will continue for some more time, but it is only for a temporary period. It has got a direct link with the world's consumptions. The moment you will find the India Incorporated and World Incorporated start manufacturing their operations, these oil price will start growing. So far I know, US has already opened to a great extent. India will also open maybe after 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it may be. So it is a game for another 1 month maximum, after which you will find the oil will take its own course. Mind that cost of exploration of 1 barrel oil is $45, against they are selling at $22 to $25. They are making per barrel loss of $20. It cannot sustain. And on oil economy, today, not only Gulf countries are defending, US is also defending. Now, US is the one of the largest exporter of oil. We have always seen US is the importer of oil. But that change, that scenario has been changed in the recent past when USA discovered shale gas. They are now manufacturing huge amount of oil from shale gas, and they have no other alternative but to export. So US economy is also depending on the oil economy. And if US economy is weakened, there will be an impact on all countries. India's major exporting country is USA, mind that, major exporting country. And India has a positive exchange with USA, around $20 billion positive. So if US economy breaks down due to oil price, negative oil price, it is not the only Gulf countries will suffer, large countries will suffer. So therefore, but it is not going to happen since its price is directly linked with the world consumption. The moment you will find that countries have started manufacturing their operations and gone back to their normal work, maybe within 1 or 2 months, you will see oil will certainly jump, but it may not be 65. I think you can expect at least another 6 months within the price range between 25 to 40. Beyond that, maybe after some time it can cross. But still India is benefited because India has not passed on these benefits to the consumers, because you must be knowing that although we are buying oil at $21 per, we are still selling 72, 73 rupees petrol and others. The price additional, the benefit is government has got it, that they have recovered in the form of additional excise duty. So that way, the deficit finance is being supported by this oil, but this is not going to continue for a long period. So my view is that the price which you see today is basically for a temporary period of maybe 1 or 2 months. Thereafter, it will take its own course, and it will ultimately reach to 40, 45, because below 45, exploration is not viable. And if exploration is not viable, no further investment will come in the oil segments. And after 1 or 2 years, you will not have any oil, because all wells will be totally not usable, not sustainable. So it is not a very positive information. Maybe temporarily it is a positive for India and China, but it is not a positive sign for the economy as a whole.
Right. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your wonderful deliberations and enlightening us with so much of knowledge today. Any other participants, anybody, in case you have any other question, you can ask, or over to Sharbani for the closing comments. Sharbani, so your video is unmute. Your voice is on mute.
Thank you all for joining today. We will have our next session on Monday, 27th, on recent developments on GST, customs and foreign trade policy. We will be having with us speakers from Excite, Mr. Hirok Dash, Mr. Sushil Goel, and Mr. Vivek Jalan. So any more questions for today, or we can close now? Any questions? So thank you for joining today. See you on Monday with our next sessions on GST, customs and foreign trade policy.
Thank you. Thanks to Anandita for your help in giving all these statistics, data, research.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for. Thank you for deliberation. Very good, Mr. Chatterjee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Anindita, also. Thank you, Anindita.
Thank you, Anindita, for your statistics and all support. Yeah.
Please join on Monday again.
Okay. Thank you.